Hello and welcome to PC Retro Tech. So in today's video we're going to be unboxing and ultimately repairing a Plus Hardcard from the 1980s. So this was a video that I originally uploaded to my personal channel, but unfortunately the sound quality wasn't very good, but the video did quite well, so I thought I would upload it to the main channel. So this is the box that it came in, and you can see it's got stickers all over it because it came through customs here where I live in Germany. And because this is a very valuable card, I decided to go all the way out to customs in person to pick it up because I didn't want it to go through the post any more than it had to. And this is the way it looked when I got there, and customs actually wanted me to open it when I was there and show them what was inside it in person, and then to pay all the customs duty and import duties on it. So let's open it up, and this is what was inside. It was originally plastic wrap, but I've taken the plastic off. So this is Plus Hardcard 20. It's a 20 megabyte hard drive, and on one end of the drive you have a hard drive, and the other end is a controller, all in one unit. And this was designed to go in early PC and XT machines. So in the AT era, of course, you had a BIOS that you could configure with settings and so on, but this one had its own ROM built into it. So it says it's compatible with the Ibm Pc, the PC XT, and the Ibm Pc 3270, and various other machines like the Compact Portable, Compact Plus, Compact Desk Pro, AT&T PC 6300, and the Olivetti PC M24. But I'm going to try it in my Amstrad PC 1512 and Amstrad 1640, which are also PC machines, but clones. And I'm going to also try it in an original IBM PC. So there's a little note here, and it says, if your system is an older computer with a 64K motherboard, you may need to upgrade the BIOS ROM chip on the CPU board. Consult your dealer for details. So I was a bit worried when I read that because, I've got an original IBM PC, and I wasn't sure whether I had a really early model with only 64 kilobytes of memory on board. So I didn't know at this stage whether it was going to work in the IBM PC. Turned out I didn't need to worry about this, but yeah, it was worrying when I first saw that on the box. So it says 1986 Plus Development Corporation. So I think they were a very popular drive in the day, and they come up on eBay quite often, but obviously not in boxes like this. So let's take it out of the box and see what it actually looks like. So there's a foam tray in here which just slides out, and presumably all the goodies are inside this. So yeah, inside there's some labels and manuals on top here. So there's 3 manuals, and there's these decals. It says the decal above will let people know that your PC is supercharged with a hard card. Affix it to the front panel of your computer. Affix the decal below to the reinstallation diskette that is created during hard card installation. So apparently there's software that actually came on the drive, but this is available on the internet. You can just download this these days. You don't need to actually get it off the drive itself. So the first manual is just the warranty and service manual, and it's Canadian, so no surprises that it's in English and French. So I don't think I'll bother mailing that in. Then the next manual is this hard card installing application software onto your hard card. So this is actually just how to install various software programs onto the drive, like DBase 3, Lotus 123, PFS File, WordStar, and any other non-copy protected software, and it just gives you information about how to install it. And I'm surprised they do this, because if you knew that you needed a hard drive and you knew what they were for, you probably knew how to install software by that point. So the third manual here is the installation reference manual, and so this has 5 chapters or 6 chapters and an appendix. So it's very well illustrated. You can see there's lots of nice diagrams in here. The first chapter is about installing your hard card in your personal computer, and it goes through all the different model computers, PCs and XTs that it was compatible with. So the difference between a PC and an XT is that the XT already had a hard drive in it. So you needed to be able to install either a a first drive or a second drive in the machine, depending on whether it was a PC or an XT. So they go through all these details. The next chapter is on the hard card directory, which is the software on the drive, and then there's getting acquainted with your hard card equipped computer. Then chapter 4 is using hard card as a second hard disk, and then the final section is a bunch of error messages and diagnostics, which hopefully you won't need to see, but unfortunately you'll see later in the video that we do. So this is what it looks like. It's all shiny and new in this anti-static bag. This is the front of the drive, and this is the back of the drive here. So let's have a look at what else is in the box here. So yeah, there's this black plastic thing here. This is actually a retention clip that clips into the front of an Ibm Pc 5150, the original Ibm PC, and other PCs that it supported. And it's just a thing to hold the front of the card as you slot it in to the slot. This one here just said front. I don't know what kind of model computer this is from, but presumably this is also some kind of retention clip to hold the cards in place in one of the other clone PCs. Interesting piece of plastic, but we're not going to use that today. Oh, and there's one other here. There's a third one, which is just a clear plastic retention clip. It's quite similar to the black one, but I know the black ones go in the Ibm PC because there are already other exactly the same, others that were exactly the same already in the PC. So I knew that the black one was for the PC. So this is the board. It's really miniature. I mean, this is tiny compared. It's only 3.5 inches wide. And it's tiny compared to other hard drives of the day, which were absolutely massive. They were much thicker and much, used a lot more power as well. So yeah, it takes an 8-bit ISA slot, and yeah, you can see that there's a ROM on board and various other chips. There's only one jumper on the thing, and that selects between first and second hard drive, or equivalently between PC and XT. If you've got a second hard drive, you must have an XT, or you must have bought an XT, because XTs had hard drives in them and the PCs didn't. So in this one, it's actually labeled PC and XT on the board instead of first and second, but on some models it's first and second. So this is the back, and you can see that there's really miniaturized components on here. There's like surface mount and so on all over it, which surprised me a bit because this is 1986. But yeah. So the first thing I wanted to try, of course, was putting it into my Amstrad PC 1512. And so this is a PC class machine, but I've upgraded this one with a hard drive, or at least I bought it with a hard drive in it. And so the first thing to do is to take out the existing hard drive, which is a similar deal. It's also a card with a drive up one end and controller up the other end. This is a very reliable drive, and you have to be pretty careful taking it out. These are really ancient bits of electronics, but it just wiggles out and you just slide it out of the slot. And this is what it looks like. It looks like it's in bad condition, but it's actually really reliable. It's a tandem drive, and I've had no problems with it whatsoever. I really like this drive, and if I could find another one, I would use one of those in my computer, but they just don't come up on eBay. So here I'm clipping in the new hard card, the Plus development one, and just making sure that it's not too heavy up one end or the other, and it's sitting in the slot nicely. And then we just put the back cover on the computer again and connect the monitor up. So put the monitor back on top, and then we power up the machine to see whether it goes. But unfortunately, in this particular case, it didn't work. It actually came up with an error message, so offer the monitor again and take the drive back out. Certainly wasn't going to be working in this machine. The error message that came up is hard controller failure, and this can only mean one of two things according to the manual. Either the jumper is in the wrong setting, or the hard card has failed and you should take it back to your dealer. So I was a bit worried about this at this point, because I've seen this message way too often. In fact, I've never actually had one of these drives that is not faulty. So this was bought new old stock, and so I thought that maybe this one wouldn't have any problems, but yeah, already it's not looking good. And when I looked at the jumper and saw first, my heart sank because I knew that this was the first hard drive in the machine. But I thought I'd try it in the second position, in the XT position, and see whether something was different. Maybe it would, maybe half the controller would work and the other wouldn't, or something like that. I mean, I was clutching at straws. So I plugged it back in again, and unfortunately that didn't work either. So I thought, well, I can try it in a different machine. I'll try it in my original IBM PC. So this is the PC 5150 Model B, and this is the one I wasn't sure whether the BIOS would be compatible. Oh, and I realized that I needed to put the retention clip in the front, so that clipped into the front, and then the drive just slips in between the retention slot and the slot at the back of the machine. And then I start up the computer, and unfortunately the same error message, controller error. So it didn't look good at this point. Either I was having real compatibility issues, or this was actually a faulty drive. So I decided to run fdisk anyway, and see whether it could even detect the drive. And unfortunately it comes up and it says in German, in this particular case, no hard drives found, no fixed disk present. So yeah, that was very disappointing at this point. I started to really suspect this wouldn't work at all, and that I'd bought a dud. So the next machine I decided to put it into was my PC 1640, and I reasoned that this machine was made after the hard card, and there was some chance that maybe it would work in this. Maybe there'd be a later ROM BIOS or something in this machine and that it would work. I mean, obviously according to the box it should have worked in the other machines as well, and to my surprise, when I ran fdisk on this one, sorry for the flashing here, that's just because of my monitor and the camera I was using. It goes away in a moment. But yeah, I was able to actually put a partition on the drive, and it detected. So what I think happened is the drive got knocked or moved about or something, and it just, in installing it in this machine, it just knocked something loose internally. It was just enough to get it to flash to life for a little bit. So yeah, I put a partition on the drive, a DOS partition, and then I started formatting the drive. And it took a long time to get through the format, which worried me a little bit, but it was going through. So at this point I started to get quite happy, because it seemed like I might actually have a working drive after all. And in fact, this was the machine that I most wanted to put this drive into. I already had a drive for my PC 1512, and the IBM 5150, well, that one is got a very low wattage power supply, so I wasn't sure I wanted to put it in there anyway. But yeah, so I booted up the drive after formatting it to system. You can see there's no floppy in the drive there, and it actually seemed to be working. I actually managed to boot into DOS on the hard drive after I'd installed it, and yeah, everything seemed fine. But about 15 minutes later, this is what I saw. I didn't do anything, but this is what came up. It's just complete gibberish. The volume label is gibberish, and all the files and directories are all complete gibberish, and they're not files that I put on there by any stretch of the imagination. These just all randomly appeared. So I was pretty annoyed at this point and thought that yeah, this drive was definitely quite faulty. It's really unreliable sectors on it at some point. And it was still a bit of a mystery to me why it wasn't working in the other machines, and it worked partially but not completely in this machine. So I decided to do some investigation, and well, of course the first thing I tried to do was to format the drive again, but I actually had a problem with formatting the drive again. You'll see in a moment that the first thing that DOS asks for when you try to format a hard drive is the volume label, but the volume label is all these really unprintable characters, and I looked up ASCII character tables for this particular machine in the manual, which I happen to have a copy of. Tried to enter them using keyboard alt codes, but there were some of the characters were not even printable. So then I tried label, which should remove the existing label, but every time I tried this, nothing actually changed. When this is actually the A drive I'm doing here, but when I go onto the C drive and do that, I still get that dodgy volume label, and it's exactly the same as it was before. I hadn't actually removed it. So there was no way for me to format the drive, and at this point I was really frustrated. So I decided to pull the drive apart. I thought the only way I'm going to be able to get this to work is to pull it apart and see what's actually wrong with it. Maybe I can repair it. Obviously I've got some dodgy sectors on there, but maybe there's some other problem with this drive. So I very carefully pulled the black plastic cover off the front of the drive with a knife. You can see I've separated it here. This is just the drive, not the controller. And yeah, it took ages to get that off without cracking the black plastic because it's all glued on. But I managed to get it on and unscrew the top, and this is what the drive looks like inside. So that big orange thing, round thing, is the platters where the information is stored, and you can see the heads that move across the drive. And you can see the surface on that is not really very uniform. So the real problem though turned out to be right down the middle of the drive. There was this rubber stopper right in the middle there where that pin is. Underneath there's a rubber stopper that had completely perished, and when I started to pick at it, it was like wet glue or something. Instead of rubber, it was really soft and gooey. And so I got some cotton swabs and just many swabs actually, and pulled all this black goo out. The rubber would just absorb into the cotton swabs. That's how sticky it was. And that was actually causing the heads to stick. And because the heads were sticking, the drive wouldn't spin up. And so there was no way to actually access the drive because it needs to find track 0 in order to be able to read the files. So this particular drive was not hard to fix, so it took ages to get that stuff out, but then I replaced it with this foam. This is sticky foam. It didn't stick very well, so I ended up super gluing it around that pin in the middle just to block the heads from banging up against the metal on this arm that moves back and forward. This sort of foam just acts as a stop to prevent it from going too far in or too far out to the outside of the drive. So that seemed to be a reasonable fix for this. So then I put the drive back in again, and I was able to F-disk it, and it started to format. But then I noticed this: if I move the monitor back, it stops formatting, and if I move the monitor forwards, it would start formatting again. And so it seems like there's radio frequency interference from this monitor and the drive. I mean, the drive's all sealed up at this point, so even in that metal case, it was still getting enough radio frequency interference from the monitor to stop it actually working. So yeah, I decided in the end that I would have to move this monitor off the thing. I mean, it was really going quite slowly, and it would stick on some of the heads and so on. So I put the monitor beside the computer like this, and you can see it just flying through the heads and cylinders now, formatting the drive much faster. So I had a lot of problems with the first few and the last few sectors on the drive. And of course, I wasn't sure whether it was the monitor. I tried various tests, like pushing down on where the monitor sits in this bay here and seeing whether it was a pressure issue or something like that, but it really wasn't. It was radio frequency interference. So at least that problem was fixed. But I still had some bad sectors on the beginning and end of the drive, and I guess what happens is that the coding that's put on the drive in the factory is just not even across the whole surface, and at the beginning and end of the drive it's a lot thinner, and you could actually see that just by looking at it. And I think this wasn't accepting data as reliably as the rest of the drive. But once I put a partition on that skipped the first few cylinders and the last few, well, when I say a few, I actually lost about 17% of the drive. Then I could actually get it to format all the way through and to To check whether the drive was working, I got a copy of ScanDisk and put it onto floppies for this machine, and was able to run ScanDisk on the drive to see if there were any bad sectors. And I found around about cluster 40 there was actually one that was occasionally seemed to say that it was faulty, but it was usually recoverable. But in this ScanDisk run here, it actually went all the way through the drive, and there were no issues whatsoever. So these drives were really quite amazing for the day. They actually had a really unique mechanism for determining what cylinder it was at. So there's a little glass window in there with lines scored across it really closely together. And as that moved, it was attached to the heads, and as the heads moved back and forth, there was a little optical sensor that would read these little grooves, and so it would know exactly where each track was just by counting off the grooves on this thing. It's really impressive the different ways that drive manufacturers came up with in the day to get accurate reading of drives, accurate location of the cylinders and the tracks and so on. And I mean, other mechanisms were that they would wrap a very flexible piece of metal around like a pin, and as the heads moved in and out, it would unravel and circle back around the pin, almost like a tape on a tape reel. And they were able to then use a stepper motor to keep everything really in check, so that there was just no movement in anything, and they could keep a very precise movement of the heads. So I was pretty happy when I saw this, because it got almost all the way through the drive without any errors. You can see that there are no bad clusters whatsoever on this drive, at least on the partition that I made, which is something like 87% or 83% of the drive, after I got rid of the clusters that didn't work at the beginning and end. So it looked like this was going to be a successful repair, and indeed ScanDisk said that it didn't find any problems on the drive. And yeah, I was very happy at this point, because this is actually the first drive that I've ever been able to repair, but I've even been able to find the problem with it. So yeah, it was pretty exciting, and of course I was still a little bit skeptical. I mean, I don't really know exactly what ScanDisk is doing, so I wanted to just convince myself that actually this was working. So yeah, it was still booting into DOS. And what I wanted to do was just put some files on the drive and then read them again and make sure that they were really actually there, because there was just no way for me to be totally sure that it would actually really hold files. So I decided to put a DOS disk in the floppy and then copy all the files across to the C drive and see whether it would actually take the files. And in fact, it seemed to do that. I was able to put the entire floppy disk on, and you'll see in a moment that the whole drive goes across without any problems. It's still very slow. Actually, the drive is very slow. Even compared to the floppy drive, it's not that much faster. But yeah, all the files went on, and if I change into the DOS directory, after I copy them all on there and do it, then there they all are. So I started to feel like I might have made progress here, that I might actually have a working drive. I was still a bit worried because, I mean, really only this shows that the file allocation tables and the directories are there. So I really needed something that would actually use a little bit more of the drive. So what I decided to do was to put on some games and just play them. And I found one game in particular that was particularly suitable because it did a lot of loading from the hard drive. And this was a game called Grand Prix Circuit, which is was available both in CJ and EGA. But on this machine it runs in EGA because it has an EGA monitor. And so this is what it looks like, and you can see it's actually running just perfectly from the drive here. So at this point I was pretty convinced that I'd actually successfully repaired the drive. which was a nice feeling. So this is actually a pretty fun game. It's a Grand Prix simulator, and for its day it was really advanced. It doesn't have a very high frame rate. It's only 3 or 4 frames a second, or maybe 5 or so. But then again, this is an 8 megahertz CPU. It's an 8086. It's a 16-bit processor, but it has 16-bit registers in it, and yeah, it runs really slow compared to anything more recent. So yeah, obviously all the graphics have loaded off the disk, and all of these start sequences worked perfectly. So it looked like yeah, the hard drive was really holding files. So at this point I was actually convinced that finally that I had actually been successful. So yeah, you'll see here in a moment there's only about maybe 3 or 4 or 5 frames a second at best in this game. It's very, very slow, but it's actually still a lot of fun to play. It's a little bit hard to play. It's very hard to steer, and I'm pretty hopeless at it actually. I think you can hook a joystick up to it as well, but yeah, I just wanted to make sure that it was working, and that all the hard drive was working. That was really the only reason that I put this on there. So it wasn't because I wanted to actually play the game. I mean, I've got much better things to do with my time, of course. Anyway, so yeah, I quit out of this game, back to DOS, and so the next thing, I got to thinking, you know, if it works in this machine, and the problem all along was just the that pin with the rubber stop on it, maybe now that I've replaced it, it'll work here. So you can see the little plus icon in the upper right hand corner that was flashing, and that means the drive was working, and yeah, you can see it boots into DOS on the PC 1512. So this was the first machine that we tried it in, which just didn't work when we first put it in, but now that we've repaired the drive, it seems to work here as well. So I got very bold at this point, and I thought, well, if it works in the PC 1512, maybe it also works in the original IBM PC. As I mentioned at the beginning, I was unsure whether it would work because the box says if you only have 64K of memory on the main board of the IBM PC, then you might, you know, have an early BIOS revision that doesn't support hard drives. So I didn't know whether to expect it to work or not. It does say on the box that it supports the IBM PC, but then it, you know, goes on to say this thing about the 64 kilobytes. But this was also a pretty early machine. I think this was also about 1986. So I decided to try the IBM PC that I had. This is the Model B 5150, and yeah, so it starts up. Actually, it takes a long time to start this machine, but you'll see in a moment the little plus icon will start flashing in the right hand corner of the screen, which will indicate that it's actually working. And in fact, yep, it is booting from the floppy drive at the moment, but if I then dir the C drive, you'll see that if I go to the C drive, you'll see that all the files that I put on previously, the DOS directory in the game and so on, are all there, and you can see that plus icon flashing. So yeah, it's been successful. We've got a completely working drive. And so hopefully you enjoyed the video, and if you like this style of content, don't forget to subscribe, and if you want to see when new videos are uploaded, don't forget to click the notification icon. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in a later video. Bye.